Welcome to the Laverne Church of the Brethren's weekly audio message. Here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, we create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus. And through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. And now let us ground ourselves as we enter into today's message.
The Gospel according to John. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors were locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails on his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God."
It is now evening on that first Easter. It's been a tumultuous day with inexplicable discoveries and an unexplained appearance and an encounter. And now we pick up the story following Mary's announcement to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." With this news, the disciples, who have spent the day hiding at home, gather at a common meeting place. Everyone is there except Thomas. They secure the doors for fear of the religious authorities and for fear of being blamed for taking Jesus' body. Now, I imagine the room is pitch dark because they don't want anyone to know where they're at or for their attention to draw, or their location to draw attention. The disciples are filled with angst as they huddle close. Their emotions and their fears are running rampant. However, what I'm most interested in is, where's Thomas? Where is Thomas? Did he not get the memo? Is he still hunkered down at home, hiding? Or did he arrive at the meeting place to find that the doors were locked and no one heard him knocking? Or is he running about the community trying to evade the authorities or elude the authorities? For whatever reason, Thomas is noticeably absent. And it's into this fear-filled, anxious setting that the Divine One appears with this message: peace be with you. Jesus shows them his scars. Seeing and hearing Jesus' message of peace helps to assuage their fears. And before Jesus leaves, he offers a blessing of peace again. Thomas heard neither of these blessings. And it wasn't long after Jesus had exited that Thomas arrives. The disciples and Mary tell Thomas, "We have seen the Lord." To which Thomas replies, "I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I need to see and to experience it for myself." And no matter what the disciples say, Thomas will not change his mind. A week later, the disciples gathered again. And the gospel writer reports the doors are closed, which suggests to me that they're still dealing with animosity and fear. And this time, Thomas is present. And as it happened the week before, the Divine One appears unannounced and again declares, "Peace be with you." And Jesus then turns to Thomas. "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Don't doubt their word, but believe." And Thomas answered Jesus, "My Lord and my God." This is one of my favorite biblical stories. Why? Because I find Thomas's honesty to be courageous. Thomas is undeterred in wanting to know and to see personally. Now, I don't think Thomas is being obstinate. I believe Thomas is just being brutally honest. I want to see. Now, for me, it may be for you too, the life lessons that stick are the ones which I've experienced firsthand. The advice of others is fine and good, but it only goes so far when it comes to integrating the lessons of life into faith and my understandings. See, walking with someone through an experience is different than giving all the answers or doing it for them. For me, this is what Thomas is seeking: someone to walk with him. What also inspires me in this story is that Jesus receives Thomas's questions. Jesus is willing to meet Thomas where he's at, which suggests to me that Jesus is willing to hold space for Thomas as he grapples with his fears, with his doubts, and with his emotions. Jesus holds space for Thomas to wrestle with life and to wrestle with faith. I believe that Jesus' respectful response allows Thomas to find answers to the questions he's seeking. Jesus' calm presence and words of peace open the door for Thomas to move beyond his fears and doubts, or at least to not be inhibited by them. I also believe that by not dismissing and judging Thomas's questions, Jesus allows Thomas space to reach his own conclusions in affirmation of faith. Jesus does not push or rush Thomas into making a statement. Instead, Jesus holds space for Thomas to experience the fullness of his presence. Jesus' patience and empathy towards Thomas's needs to see and to touch and to process what's going on demonstrates Jesus' support of Thomas. Jesus' openness to walking with and accompanying Thomas along this journey is transformative. Thomas's encounter with Jesus reminds me of my pastoral mentor when I was in college. As a licensed pastor, I was still discerning the call, and as such, I was assigned a mentor whom I met with regularly to discuss what was happening in ministry. I was serving 2 small congregations at the time as I was a student. In these meetings with my mentor was an opportunity to ask questions about church life and to seek guidance on how to improve my skills. My mentor accompanied me through some rather challenging times. His mentoring took on many forms: going to lunch, playing racquetball, chatting over a cup of coffee. His relationship and his presence for me were invaluable. I remember on one occasion when it felt very urgent, I called him for advice. I had just received a call from a couple whose baby was stillborn. This was their first child. And I recalled the immensity of their grief and the disappointment of loss that was stirred up within them and the anger that they felt towards God. This is one of my first pastoral experiences of death and planning a funeral. And I felt like I'd been thrown into the deep end of a pool. Like Thomas and the disciples, my spirit was filled with angst. And I was afraid of saying or doing something wrong. And so I reached out to my mentor. He talked me through the process of planning a funeral and the impact that grief has on individuals. Now, he didn't write the service for me, which would have been helpful. But instead, he coached me through the planning process and pointed me toward some very helpful resources. And that way I was enabled to do it myself. My mentor also pointed out to me that the most important thing is to show up and be present, to walk with others. This experience also brought to the forefront for me a childhood loss. My second sister was stillborn. And the couple's emotions mirrored the emotions that I and my family had experienced: disbelief, disappointment, and anger. Although I did not understand the depth of loss as a child, it made an impression on me. And as a young adult, I could resonate with the feelings of this couple, and I felt deep empathy for them. Following the graveside service with this devastated couple, I returned home where a message was awaiting me from a beloved church member who made the best coconut cream pies. But it wasn't an invitation for dessert. Instead, she had just received news that her 16-year-old son, or grandson, had committed suicide. It was almost too much for her to bear. I went and I sat with this weeping grandmother. I also accompanied the family to the funeral home to make arrangements. I discovered something in that experience, that when you walk with others and you hold space for the expression of emotions and questions and doubts, something profound happens. A deep relationship is formed. But also it opens you up to emotions that are within you that perhaps you weren't aware of. And I discovered strength and a gift for ministry that still lasts even to today. Holding space for another is sacred work. It's sacred work. For someone who was green in ministry at the time, I found myself engulfed in a sea of emotions, those of grieving families as well as my own. And for a moment, I felt locked in, not sure how to respond. And like Thomas and Mary and the disciples, I was trapped within the emotions of fear and grief. And as a result, I reached out to my mentor, whose guidance and presence provided a place for questions and to grapple with those deep matters of life and faith. Having such a person who held space for me was transformative, as it was for Thomas. My mentor didn't judge my actions or my questions, just like Jesus did for Thomas and Mary and the disciples. My mentor received me with grace and understanding. And he was able to do so because he had walked that path. And he was walking it again with me. For me, a lesson from this story is when the unimaginable happens, we need a safe space in which to be held. We too need to hear the words, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." Those words need to be softly spoken and caringly spoken. And with such a message, we can find assurance that we are not alone. For the Divine One is ready and waiting to hold sacred space for us to dwell in. May it be so. Let us go forth into the hope of the words of peace be with you, that we may be a presence of peace and care and calm as we and others grapple with questions of life. Let us go in peace.
We're so glad that you listened to the message today. If you're looking for an open and affirming, peace-loving, and justice-seeking congregation, consider visiting us for in-person worship on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. We'd love to meet you.